Hello everyone, I wish you peace and happiness. Are you all healthy? Today, I will continue to share with you the difficult, scarce and challenging days of Huyen and her mother trying to make a living. The morning at the small house begins in a peaceful atmosphere. The gentle early sunlight spreads over the small garden in front of the yard, with dew still clinging to each lush vegetable bed. Micah sits outside in the garden, carefully picking each tender sprout and placing it into the basket beside her. The girl works very carefully, her tiny hands skillfully plucking each fresh stalk of vegetables. In the front yard of the small house, Huyen sat next to her dog Pippy with a gentle and patient look. Pippy and Appo's hind legs were injured and unable to walk normally. He could only move by supporting himself with his front legs. Huyen gently petted and encouraged him, saying, and quote, "Keep going, Pippy, just a little at a time." End quote. Hearing Huyen and Appo's voice, Pippy tried to lift each small step with his front legs. Although still slow and unsteady, he did not give up. Huyen smiled, always by his side to cheer him on and give him more motivation to practice every day. Seeing Pippy struggle to walk, Huyen gently bent down and picked up the small dog into her arms. She stroked Pippy and Appo's head and softly comforted him, and quote, "It and Appo's okay, let and Appo's take a break," end quote. Then Huyen brought the walker closer, carefully placed Pippy in the correct position, and gently secured his injured hind legs. She checked each strap to ensure it was secure before patting his head and encouraging him, end quote. "Come on, let and Appo's try again," end quote. With Huyen and Micah standing beside him, continuously cheering him on, Pippy gathered all his courage to continue practicing walking. Huyen smiled and clapped to motivate him, end quote. "Keep going, Pippy, you and Appo's almost there," end quote. Micah cheerfully exclaimed, end quote. "Pippy is so brave, just a little more effort," end quote. Hearing the familiar words of encouragement, Pippy tried to move forward little by little with his front legs, the walker slowly rolling behind him. Each step, though still slow and difficult, was a precious effort. Seeing Pippy progress bit by bit, mother and daughter happily clapped and continued cheering to give him more motivation not to give up. Huyen looked at the small dog for a moment before gently going inside the house. The small kitchen still smelled faintly of breakfast. Huyen opened the bamboo basket and took out a ripe watermelon that she had saved from the day before. She carried the watermelon out and placed it on the bamboo table in front of the house, carefully wrapping it in a plastic bag to keep it clean. As she tied the bag, she looked toward the small road in front of the house, her heart recalling the times Mr. Da had helped her and her mother through difficult times. From helping to repair the house, bringing supplies, to quietly leaving rice and money to help them get through lean days. Huyen smiled softly, thinking she would take this watermelon to thank Mr. Da sincerely. Although a small gift, it was a gesture of the hearts of her mother and herself for someone who had always silently cared for and helped them. Huyen quickly put on her worn brown shirt inside the house. She placed a hat on her daughter and Appo's head and adjusted it neatly. Before leaving, Huyen looked back at Pippy lying next to the walker. She sat down and gently stroked the soft fur of the small dog. Pippy lifted her head and looked at Huyen and Micah as if understanding what she wanted to say. Huyen smiled and said, end quote, "Pippy, stay good at home, okay? Mom and Micah will be gone for a little while and then come back. Rest, Don and Appo's overexert yourself or your leg will hurt." End quote. Pippy wagged her tail softly, her eyes following Huyen and Micah. Micah also bent down to pat Pippy and Appo's head and said, end quote, "Pippy, wait at home for your mom and sister to come back." End quote. Huyen carefully took the watermelon wrapped in a plastic bag, gently placing it into a bamboo basket. She adjusted the strap of the basket and then slung it over her shoulder. Before leaving, Huyen turned back to look at the small house one more time, then approached and closed the wooden door carefully. In the yard, Pippy was still lying beside the walker, looking up at the mother and daughter. Micah held her mother and Appo's hand while Huyen held her daughter and Appo's hand as they stepped onto the small dirt road in front of the house. The mother and daughter slowly left under the morning sunlight, the bamboo basket on Huyen and Apo's shoulder containing a simple gift but full of gratitude for the person who had once helped them in difficult times. Huyen tightly holds Micah and Apo's small hand, and the mother and daughter walk together along the familiar village road. The dirt road stretches through rows of green trees and peaceful fields. The bamboo basket on Huyen and Apo's shoulder gently sways with each step, containing a watermelon she brought to give to Anda. Micah walks while looking at everything around her, occasionally glancing up at her mother and smiling. Huyen gently guides her daughter, feeling warm inside despite the long distance, because today she can personally thank the person who silently helped her and her daughter. After a long journey, the mother and daughter finally arrive at their destination. Before Huyen and Micah, Anda and Apo's house gate gradually appears behind the trees. Reaching the gate of Mr. Do and Apo's house, Huyen gently opened the closed iron gate. She bent down and lifted Micah into her arms, carefully carrying the basket of watermelon. The two of them stepped through the gate, walking along the small path between the lush green corn stalks leading to the house. The tall corn stalks swayed gently in the breeze, and the morning sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating streaks of light on the small path. Micah curiously looked at the surrounding trees. Huyen walked slowly, carrying her daughter, her heart pounding with anticipation as she was about to meet Mr. Da to give him the small gift as a token of her gratitude. Entering Mr. Do and Apo's house, Huyen saw that the front door was locked. She was slightly surprised, paused for a moment, then gently placed the bamboo basket down beside her. Micah, held in her mother and Apo's arms, also looked around, curious to see where Mr. Do was. Huyen walked around the house, looking towards the back garden and softly called out, "Mr. Da," but only the sound of wind rustling through the trees answered her. She walked around the yard again, looking at the familiar garden, but still couldn't in Apo's see Mr. Da. Huyen stood on the porch, feeling a little disappointed that she had brought gifts but hadn't in Apo's met him. She bent down to adjust Micah and Apo's hat, then looked towards the locked door, wondering where Mr. Da had gone. In the vast field, Mr. Da was hunched over amidst the lush green rows of peanuts. Under the morning sun, beads of sweat dotted his face. His calloused hands carefully pulled up each peanut plant, gently shaking off the soil clinging to the tubers before setting them aside. Today, someone had hired him to pull up peanuts, so Mr. Da took the opportunity to work for extra income. The work was hard, but he still tried his best to do it diligently. He believed that with hard work, life would gradually improve. In the peaceful field, Mr. Da continued to work tirelessly, unaware that this morning, Huyen had brought a watermelon to his house to thank him for the kindness he had silently shown to her and her mother over the past time. Not finding Mr. Da at home, Huyen carried Micah out to rest on the porch. She gently placed her sandals down beside her, then sat on the wooden steps in front of the house. The bamboo basket containing the watermelon was neatly set aside. Seeing that Micah seemed tired from her long journey, Huyen took off her conical hat and gently fanned her daughter. The breeze from the hat across Micah and Apo's small face made her feel more comfortable. Micah leaned against her mother and Apo's chest, resting peacefully, her eyes scanning the quiet courtyard. After waiting a long time on the porch but still not seeing Mr. Da return, Huyen looked out at the small road in front of the gate, feeling a little regretful. She stood up, brushed off her clothes and walked to the bamboo basket. Huyen took out the watermelon and carefully hung it on the padlock on the door. She tied the plastic bag securely so the watermelon wouldn't in Apo's fall, then looked at the small gift with a gentle smile. Even though she hadn't an Apo's met Mr. Da, she still wanted to leave a small token of gratitude from her and her daughter to him. Huyen turned back, picked Micah up and held her daughter and Apo's small hand. The two stood on the porch for a little longer, then slowly walked out the gate. The iron gate closed behind them, and Huyen and Micah left Mr. Do and Apo's house hand in hand. After a long journey, Huyen didn't and Oppos rush home but continued searching for more goods to earn extra income. Walking along a small road near the village, she unexpectedly spotted a large greenhouse filled with ripening yellow melons. Huyen, carrying Micah in her arms, stepped into the garden and gently inquired about the owner. The round, fragrant melons lay on the rows, making her hopeful that she could buy some to sell at the market. She chatted with the owner, asking about the price of each melon and checking which ones were ripe and delicious. Micah, nestled in her mother and Oppos' arms, happily gazed at the melons scattered throughout the garden. Huyen looked at her daughter and smiled, hoping for a successful day of sales to provide for their lives. They continued working diligently under the sun. He bent down, pulling each peanut plant from the ground, gently brushing off the soil clinging to the pods, then sat down and plucked the peanuts from the stems. His hands nimbly gathered the pulled peanuts into small piles. After a while, the sacks of peanuts gradually filled up beside him. To wipe the sweat from his forehead, stood up, tied the mouths of each sack securely, and hoisted them onto his shoulder. He slowly carried the sacks of peanuts to the collection point at the edge of the field, neatly arranging them alongside everyone else and Oppos' sacks. After finishing the work, the last sacks of peanuts were finally gathered at the collection point. Mr. De stood up, brushed the dirt off his hands, and rested for a moment after hours of hard work. At that moment, the owner of the plantation approached, carrying everyone in Oppos' wages. He gave Mr. De his share of the money and thanked him for his hard work. Mr. De took the money, carefully counted it, folded it neatly, and put it in his shirt pocket. He looked back at the peanut field one last time, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and turned to leave the plantation. His steps were slow and deliberate on the dirt road. In the large cantaloupe garden, Huyen carried Micah and walked slowly among the green melon beds. After asking to buy melons from the garden owner, she put Micah down next to her and carefully began choosing each fruit. Huyen bent down and gently lifted each melon to check its ripeness. The cantaloupe melons were plump and round. The skin had a shiny color and emitted a sweet fragrance that made her very satisfied. She chooses beautiful, ripe fruits to bring to the market to sell, and leaves those that are not ripe enough on the tree. Micah stood next to her, curiously watching her mother pick melons. After picking for a while, Huyen had selected enough ripe, delicious yellow melons. She gently placed them down beside her and turned to smile at Micah. Huyen handed each melon to her daughter and said, "Micah, help me put them in the basket." Obeying her mother, the little girl happily took each melon with her tiny hands, carefully hugging them to her chest before slowly carrying them to the bamboo basket. Each time she put a melon in the basket, Micah looked at her mother and smiled brightly, as if to show off that she had helped. Soon Huyen and Oppos' bamboo basket was full of ripe, juicy yellow melons. The round melons were neatly arranged inside, emitting a gentle aroma. Micah stood beside her, looking at the basket full of melons, her small face beaming with joy at having helped her mother. Huyen adjusted the handle of the basket and, with great effort, carried the heavy basket of melons to the owner of the orchard. She set the basket down and carefully weighed the bamboo basket containing the melons with the owner. After weighing the melons, the farmer took out his ledger, carefully recorded the amount, and calculated the total. He looked at Huyen and told her the price for the melons she had chosen. Huyen nodded, took out the money she had prepared from her pocket, counted each bill carefully, and handed it to the farmer. Her hands were slightly callous from days of hard work, but her eyes were still full of hope because she now had more melons to sell at the market. The farmer took the money, checked it, and happily handed the melons to Huyen. She carefully rearranged the bamboo basket, adjusting the handles to make sure it was secure. Huyen looked at the bamboo basket full of golden melons and let out a sigh of relief. She turned to the owner of the melon garden and shyly said, "Uncle, could you help me lift this basket onto my shoulder? It and Oppos' a bit heavy." End quote. Hearing this, the owner happily came over and carefully lifted the bamboo basket for Huyen. He placed the handle neatly on her shoulder and reminded the mother and daughter to be careful on their way home. Huyen smiled and thanked him. End quote. Thank you so much, uncle. End quote. Micah also politely greeted the owner. Then, Huyen took her daughter and Appo's hand, adjusted the basket on her shoulder, and together they left the melon garden. The two walked along the small path towards the market, carrying the ripe melons, hoping to sell them all that day. On the small road home, Mr. De walked slowly, slung his hoe over his shoulder after a hard day and Appo's work in the fields. The sunlight had softened, and the trees along the roadside swayed gently in the breeze. As he walked, he thought about his day and Appo's work, feeling relieved that he had earned some extra money. After walking a long distance, his familiar house finally came into view. Mr. De stepped into the yard, opened the iron gate and slowly went inside. The house was as quiet as ever. He placed the hoe in a corner. As he reached the front door, De suddenly stopped when he saw a strange object carefully tied next to the lock. He approached and realized it was a fresh green watermelon wrapped in a plastic bag. De looked around the yard in surprise and called out, end quote, "Is anyone here?" End quote. But the only response was the silence of the small house. He put down his hoe, walked around the house, looked towards the garden and the small path in front of the gate, but saw no one. He stood there for a moment, still holding the watermelon, wondering who had brought this gift. Seeing how carefully the bag was tied, he guessed the person who left it must be an acquaintance with a kind heart. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, still holding the watermelon someone had left outside. He gently placed it on the small wooden table in the middle of the house. The house was quiet, only the sound of the wind blowing through the trees in the yard could be heard. He sat down on the bench, looked at the watermelon in front of him and silently thought. Suddenly he thought of Huyen and Micah. He remembered the times he had secretly helped them and Huyen and Appo's hard-working demeanor as she provided for her daughter. He looked at how carefully the watermelon was wrapped and tied, and guessed that Huyen must have brought it. Mr. De got up from the wooden bed and walked to the corner of the house where he usually hung his necessities. A bag of meat, carefully hung there on a nail, had been there for some time. He reached down, took the bag of meat, held it in his hand and looked at it for a long time. In the quiet little house, he remembered the image of Huyen and Micah struggling, the two of them having to fend for themselves for each meal. Mr. De sighed softly, then looked towards the table where the watermelon was placed. He thought of the small gift Huyen had left behind, and felt a warmth in his heart. He gently said to himself, end quote, Huyen must have brought this watermelon. The two of them always think of others, end quote. Looking at the bag of meat in his hand, Mr. De thought for a moment and then decided, end quote, I and Appo's I'll take this bag of meat to Huyen and her mother, end quote. He carefully tied the bag of meat, preparing to visit them, hoping that this small gift would help Huyen and Micah have another delicious meal. De, carrying a bag of meat, walked out into the yard. He carefully hung the bag on his motorbike, checked it one last time and then got on. The engine started, and De slowly rode off the small road in front of his house. The wind blew through the trees along the roadside, and his figure gradually faded into the distance on the familiar village road. He rode towards Huyen and Micah and Appo's small house. After a long walk, Huyen led Micah to their familiar market. The afternoon market was bustling with people, the sounds of laughter and vendors and Appo's calls echoing everywhere. Huyen chose an open space at the edge of the market, where many people passed by. She gently placed the bamboo basket full of melons on the ground and spread out the cloth she had brought with her. Then, Huyen carefully took each melon out of the basket, gently wiped off the dust, and arranged them neatly in rows on the cloth. The ripe, round and fragrant melons quickly attracted the attention of the market-goers. Micah sat obediently beside her mother, observing the passers-by while helping her mother display the remaining melons. Huyen smiled at their small stall, hoping they would sell all the melons today to earn some extra money to support their lives. A little while later, a customer stopped in front of Huyen and Apo's melon stall. The customer bent down to examine each melon, then smiled and asked to buy a few ripe yellow melons. Huyen cheerfully replied, gently selecting the roundest, most fragrant, and golden-skinned melons for the customer. She placed each melon on the scale, carefully watching the needle, then announced the weight and calculated the price. The customer nodded in agreement and gave Huyen the money. She received the money with both hands, counted it, and smiled in thanks. Then, Huyen carefully put the melons into a bag for the customer. The customer happily took the melons and left. Seeing that her stall was now almost empty, Huyen smiled softly. Micah, sitting beside her, also happily looked at her mother, hoping that they would sell all the remaining melons today. And Apo's motorbike slowly stopped in front of Huyen and Apo's small house. He turned off the engine, neatly parked the bike by the roadside, and carrying the bag of meat, walked across the small path shaded by green trees leading to the yard. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves. The scene was as peaceful as ever. He walked to the porch and softly called and quote, "Huyen, Micah," end quote, but only silence answered. The house door was closed, the yard was empty, and Pippy and Apo's walker was still in a corner of the porch. They stood silently for a moment, still holding the bag of meat, guessing that perhaps the mother and daughter had gone out. They gently pushed open the door and stepped inside. He placed the bag of meat neatly on the bamboo table and looked around. In the corner of the porch, Pippy was lying next to her walker. As soon as she saw the dog wagged her tail happily. He walked over, knelt down, stroked Pippy and Apo's head and gently greeted her and quote, "Pippy, were you good at home today?" End quote. Pippy snuggled her head into his hand, her tail wagging continuously as if in response to his greeting. Seeing that Pippy and Apo's water bowl was empty, they took the bowl to the water jar on the porch. He filled a bowl with cool water and brought it back, placing it right in front of Pippy. Pippy lowered her head and drank the delicious water in small sips. They sat beside her, gently stroking her head, smiling as he watched Pippy drink. They carried the bamboo chair out to the front yard and sat down. He rested his elbows on his knees, silently gazing at the empty yard. His thoughts wandered to Huyen and Micah. After a moment of contemplation, he suddenly stood up as if an idea had struck him. He went into the kitchen, took the bag of meat that was on the table, and also grabbed a bamboo tray. Carrying the bag of meat and the tray, they went to the small ditch in front of the house. He sat down at the edge of the ditch and gently washed the bamboo tray clean. His hands carefully scrubbed each corner, rinsing thoroughly before letting it dry. As he worked, he smiled to himself, thinking and quote, "I and Apo's I'll make grilled meat for Huyen and Micah. Micah will surely love it." End quote. Thinking of their smiles, they became even more careful, hoping to prepare a delicious meal so that when Huyen and Micah returned, they would have a warm and cozy dinner. He placed each piece of meat on the old wooden cutting board, picked up a knife, and carefully cut it into bite-sized portions. The gentle sound of the knife touching the board echoed in the quiet little kitchen. He worked slowly and meticulously, as if devoting his attention to the upcoming meal. After cutting the meat, he took fresh lemongrass from the vegetable basket, peeled off the outer layer, and chopped it finely. The aroma of lemongrass filled the kitchen. He added the chopped lemongrass and other spices to the meat, adding a little at a time and mixing well with his hands so that the spices permeated each piece. Huyen chose a ripe, fragrant, plump melon and gently peeled off the outer skin with a knife. She cut the melon into small bite-sized pieces, neatly placed them in a small bag, and gave it to Micah. The little girl happily accepted the melon from her mother, her eyes sparkling with delight. Huyen sat beside her, gently telling her to eat slowly. Micah ate each sweet, golden piece of melon, smiling at her mother. Watching her daughter enjoy the meal, Huyen turned back to arrange the remaining melons, continuing to wait for customers to come and buy. After marinating the meat, De started the fire to grill it. He arranged the dry firewood in the fire, lit it, and then added more wood to make the fire burn brightly. Soon the firewood began to burn red, creating a layer of glowing embers. De sat by the fire, using a small fan to fan the embers. The smoke from the fire made his eyes sting slightly, and his face turned red from the heat. He bent down and gently blew on the fire, each gust of wind making the embers burn brighter. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he patiently prepared, hoping to make a delicious grilled meat dish for Huyen and Micah. When the charcoal was glowing red, Mr. De returned to retrieve the marinated meat. He prepared clean bamboo skewers and carefully threaded each piece of meat onto them. He arranged the meat neatly, alternating pieces so that they would cook evenly and be more fragrant when grilled. De worked slowly and meticulously, occasionally looking at the meat in his hands with satisfaction. After skewering the meat, he stood up and carried each skewer to the charcoal grill. He placed the skewers on the edge of the grill, and the sound of the meat meeting the heat began to emanate softly. The aroma of lemongrass and spices gradually spread through the air. Mr. De sat by the grill, gently turning each skewer of meat to ensure it cooked evenly to a golden brown. While waiting for the skewers of meat to brown on the charcoal grill, De took the opportunity to prepare some side dishes. He got up and went to the water jar in the corner of the kitchen, picked up a small ladle, and scooped cool water into a basin. Then he took the bunch of fresh lettuce he had prepared, sat down, and carefully washed each leaf. He gently removed any wilted leaves, then rinsed each stem thoroughly under the clear running water. He then let the fresh green lettuce leaves drain in a basket. He set the basket of vegetables aside and returned to the charcoal stove. The skewers of meat were now evenly golden brown, the aroma of lemongrass and spices filling the small kitchen. He sat down, carefully turning each skewer. He gently flipped the meat over so that it cooked evenly without burning. Drops of fat from the meat dripped onto the glowing coals, creating a pleasant sizzling sound. He watched each skewer intently, occasionally fanning away the smoke. He gazed at the meat as it gradually turned a golden hue. Customers one after another stopped by Huyen and Appo's small melon stall. Every time someone stops to ask to buy them, she happily takes out the peeled melon pieces from her bag and invites them to try them. Huyen gently said, and quote, "This melon is very sweet, please try a piece to see if it is to your taste." End quote. The guests who tasted it all nodded and praised the cantaloupe as fragrant, sweet, and ripe. Seeing that the guests were satisfied, Huyen carefully selected the best fruits, weighed them and charged each person. Micah, sitting next to her, also happily helped her mother give the bag of melons to the guests. Soon, the bamboo basket that was originally full of cantaloupe was now gradually empty. The melons were finally sold out. Huyen looked at the envelope with only a few dirt marks left, smiling gently because the mother and daughter had a good sale today. The skewers of meat on the charcoal grill were finally golden brown. The aroma of grilled meat, mixed with lemongrass and spices, filled the yard. Mr. De took each skewer down, set them aside, and prepared to serve the meal. He spread a clean bamboo tray on the table, gently arranging the fresh, washed lettuce leaves on top. Then he placed the fragrant grilled meat skewers in the center of the tray, each golden piece of meat looking very appetizing. He added some vermicelli noodles and neatly placed them next to the meat, then brought out the dipping sauce he had prepared. The sauce had a balanced sweet and sour taste, fragrant with spices, ready to accompany the grilled meat and vegetables. Looking at the simple but complete meal before him, Mr. De smiled softly. He adjusted each dish neatly, his heart longing for the moment when Huyen and Micah would return so they could enjoy this warm meal together. De pulled a bamboo chair out into the yard and sat down to rest. He looked towards the small road in front of the house, patiently waiting for Huyen and Micah to return. The afternoon breeze blew gently through the trees, making the small house more peaceful. Beside him, the dog Pippy lay next to the walker, occasionally lifting its head to look towards the gate as if longing for the mother and child. Seeing Pippy looking at him, De smiled. He got up and took a piece of freshly grilled meat, fragrant and delicious, and brought it to Pippy. He sat down beside it, gently offering the meat to the dog and saying, "Here, Pippy, you have some too." Pippy happily took the meat, its tail wagging slightly. De stroked Pippy and Apo's head, watched the dog eat heartily, then turned his gaze back towards the road. De sat at a small bamboo table, his eyes occasionally glancing towards the road in front of the house. On the table, a bamboo tray with skewers of fragrant grilled meat still emitted a smoky aroma, waiting for Huyen and Micah to return. After waiting for a long time, he stood up and paced a few steps as if wanting to go outside to see if the two of them had returned. But then he turned back inside, pulled up a bamboo chair and sat down. He patiently waited, and his dog, Pippy, slowly approached from the corner of the yard. Seeing De, Pippy happily came closer, its tail wagging gently. De bent down and stroked Pippy and Apo's fur. He gently patted the dog and Apo's head and smiled, saying, "Be good, Pippy, wait for Huyen and Micah to come home." Pippy lay down beside his feet. Mr. De sat at a small bamboo table, his gaze fixed on the road in front of his house. After a while, he stood up and went outside the gate, looking towards the familiar path, hoping to see Huyen and Micah return. But after waiting for a while, he still didn't, and Apo's see them. He slowly turned back inside, pulled up a bamboo chair and sat down. His eyes gazed into the distance, a little worried. After sitting for a while longer, Mr. De looked at the bamboo tray on the table, where the skewers of grilled meat were still carefully prepared. Fearing that the food would lose its flavor if left for too long, he stood up and went to the backyard. He chose a small banana leaf, cut it with a knife and brought it inside. He gently washed the banana leaf, then carefully placed it on the bamboo tray, covering the skewers and the food inside. Having finished, he looked back at the house one last time and sighed softly. He turned and walked out into the yard, preparing to return home, leaving the meal he had prepared for Huyen and Micah when they returned. As the market gradually thinned out, Huyen sat down beside her small bag and took out the money she and her daughter had earned from selling melons that day. She carefully arranged each bill, counting it over and over again. Looking at the money in her hand, Huyen smiled softly. Although it wasn't an Apo's a large sum, it was the reward for the melons they had worked so hard to sell all day. She carefully folded the money and put it in her jacket pocket. Then, Huyen began to pack up her belongings. She folded the bags spread on the ground, gathered the small bags, and neatly placed them into the bamboo basket. The basket, which had been full of yellow melons that morning, was now much lighter. Huyen slung the bamboo basket over her shoulder and took Micah and Apo's small hand. She looked at her daughter and gently said, "Let and Apo's go home, my dear." As evening fell, Huyen held Micah and Apo's hand and walked along the familiar village road back home. The bamboo basket on her shoulder was lighter than in the morning, but her legs were still a little tired after a long day. Mother and daughter walked past rows of trees along the roadside, across the vast fields where the setting sun bathed everything in golden light. Little Micah walked beside her mother, occasionally looking up at Huyen and smiling. Huyen gently held her daughter and Apo's hand, asking as they walked, "Micah, are you tired?" Micah shook her head, leaning close to her mother. For her, simply being with her mother on the road home was a joy. The journey home was as long as usual, but Huyen felt lighter. They had sold all their melons, earning a little extra money to help with their lives. She walked slowly, leading Micah back to the small house where Pippy was waiting. In the distance, the familiar roof gradually appeared behind the green trees. Huyen and Micah held hands, continuing towards their warm little home. As they approached their small house, Huyen and Micah had just stepped through the gate when their dog, Pippy, heard the noise. Pippy hurried out to greet them, its tail wagging happily. Seeing Pippy trying to walk, Huyen was moved and bent down to hug the dog. She gently stroked Pippy and Appo's head and carried it into the yard. Were you good at home? Huyen asked softly. Pippy snuggled into Huyen and Appo's arms as if to welcome them back. Micah stopped abruptly as she stepped into the yard. She seemed to have noticed something unusual. Something was placed on the bamboo table in the garden today. Curious, Micah ran closer. She saw a banana leaf covering the bamboo tray. Gently lifting the banana leaf, Micah and Appo's eyes widened in surprise. Below was a platter of fragrant grilled meat, the golden skewers neatly arranged alongside green vegetables and rice noodles. Micah happily turned around and shouted, "Mom! Mom, there and Appo's delicious food." Hearing her daughter and Appo's call, Huyen came out. She saw the platter of grilled meat on the bamboo table, and silently realized that perhaps Mr. Da had prepared this meal for the two of them. Seeing the delicious grilled meat platter on the bamboo table, Huyen stood still for a moment. She looked around the yard. Huyen looked towards the gate, along the small path in front of the house, then turned to the garden behind. She hoped to see the familiar figure of Mr. Da, but everything was quiet. There was no calling, no footsteps, only the leaves of the trees gently rustling in the wind. She sighed softly, feeling both surprised and moved. Huyen understood that only Mr. Da could have silently prepared such a thoughtful meal for her and her daughter. Micah still stood by the bamboo table, her eyes looking at the grilled meat with delight. The little girl turned to ask her mother, "Mom, did Uncle Da make this for us?" Huyen looked at her daughter, then at the food on the table. She smiled softly, gently stroking Micah and Appo's hair. "Probably so, my dear." Huyen gently took Micah and Appo's hand. "Go inside and wash your hands, then we and Appo's eat." Huyen led Micah inside the house. She scooped water into a basin, washed her daughter and Appo's small hands and dried them with an old towel. Micah obediently stood still while her mother helped her, her eyes still fixed on the bamboo table outside with eager anticipation. After washing her hands, Micah quickly ran outside. She pulled a small chair closer to the bamboo table and sat down. In front of Micah was a platter of fragrant grilled meat, golden skewers of meat, fresh green lettuce, and white noodles neatly arranged. Her small hands carefully picked up each piece of grilled meat. She ate while smiling, her eyes shining with delight at enjoying a delicious meal that she and her mother hadn't and Appo's had in a long time. "Mom, the meat is so delicious." Micah said happily. Huyen smiled softly and went into the kitchen to clean up. Entering the small kitchen, Huyen suddenly stopped. The charcoal stove was still burning, the glowing embers casting a reddish glow, the warmth still lingering in the kitchen. She looked around, remembering how Mr. Da had quietly come to her house and prepared each meal for her and her child. From washing the meat, marinating it, lighting the fire, grilling each skewer. Everything was done with genuine care. Huyen sat down by the stove, her eyes watching the fire gradually die down. She was silent for a moment, thinking, feeling both touched and grateful. The small kitchen remained warm with the glow of the charcoal, just like the silent help Mr. Da had given her and her child during those difficult times. Huyen got up and went out into the yard. The afternoon light softened, and the small bamboo table still displayed the fragrant grilled meat that Mr. Da had prepared. Huyen sat down next to Micah, picked up pieces of grilled meat from the skewers with her chopsticks, gently blew on them to cool them down, and placed them in her daughter and Appo's bowl. "Micah, eat slowly, okay?" Micah happily accepted the meat her mother had given her, eating and smiling happily. Seeing her daughter eat so heartily, Huyen felt a sense of relief after a long, tiring day. Huyen looked at Pippy, the dog lying beside her. She took a small portion of meat, tore it into bite-sized pieces, and placed it in Pippy and Appo's bowl. "Come on, Pippy, you have some too." End quote. Pippy happily came closer, wagging its tail slightly, and enjoyed its meal. Huyen picked up her chopsticks and gently took a piece of grilled meat. Looking at the golden, fragrant meat before her, she remembered the quiet care that Mr. De had shown her and her daughter. After a long, hard day at the market, she finally had a delicious meal with her daughter. Huyen smiled softly. It was a bright smile, a smile of happiness and peace after months of hardship. She raised the meat to her lips, savoring the simple yet heartfelt flavor. Beside her, Micah continued to eat happily, while Pippy lay quietly at the foot of the table, occasionally wagging her tail. Outside, night was falling. A gentle breeze blew through the trees, and the small house was illuminated by lights, where a warm meal was shared and people found joy in life together. If everyone loves Huyen and Micah and Appo's mother and child, please subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a word of encouragement for the two of them to see the next developments. Every follow and every loving comment from everyone will be a source of comfort and strength to help Huyen get through difficult times. Thank you all very much.